Good morning. My name is Brian Plamondon, and I am a partner program manager with Protegrity. I will be moderating today's webinar. Protegrity and Royal Cyber have partnered to add value and help companies navigate their strategic initiatives around data. We believe that data is like energy. When stored, it is full of potential. The value is unlocked. The value is locked up. When used and shared, it becomes kinetic, empowering people, decisions, services, and efficiencies. Every aspect of every business will become dependent on the ability to securely share and use data. Together, Royal Cyber and Protegrity enable enterprises to unlock their data while ensuring that it is protected. Today, we are joined by Brajesh Angan, the Director of Digital Transformation at Royal Cyber, and James Rice, the Vice President of Global Pre-Sales and Solutions Engineering with Protegrity. Between the two, they have over 35 years of experience in technology, solutions engineering, and data security. It's my pleasure to now pass things over to Brajesh. You can take it away.
Thanks, Brian. If we can go to the next screen. James, if we can go to the next slide.
Yes, I'm on the Royal Cyber overview. Is that where you wanted to be?
Yeah, I'm still seeing the speaker slide.
Brian, can you confirm which slide you're seeing?
I'm currently seeing the Royal Cyber overview.
Okay. Okay. All right. Maybe there's an issue with my screen, but that's okay. So just to give you a quick overview about Royal Cyber, we are a solutions and services company. We are an IT solutions and services company based out of Chicago. We do solutions and services in middleware, cloud, DevOps, automation, digital transformation, and data science. We are headquartered in Chicago, but we have a global presence. We have offices and locations in UK, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and we also have offshore development centers in India. We are business partners with technology companies like Protegrity. We use their software to solve problems for our clients, especially in the case of Protegrity, solve data protection and data encryption and cloud adoption problems or challenges for our clients. In today's call, we're going to focus on how we can work together to help solve your requirements for cloud adoption and data encryption. James?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Brajesh, and thank you, Brian, and thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate the time. You know, we're going to go over a couple of things. I'm going to give an overview of Protegrity and our data protection platform. We have some customer case studies that we want to walk through, even some sample architecture and data flows that we'll talk through. So we've got quite a bit of content, but we will also be opening this up for Q&A at the end. So definitely make sure as we go through here that you're getting your questions in. Now, for Protegrity, I'm going to start at the very highest level, and that's really with what you see here on the slide. You know, Protegrity is focused on making data worthless in the wrong hands, but also bringing it to life in yours, because at the end of the day, data protection is important, but we also need to be able to consume and use the data. And so that's really where Protegrity's focus is. Now, oops, sorry, one too many. If I look at the business case and the reason customers are leveraging Protegrity, it really breaks down into three key areas. It's around data protection, data privacy, and data governance. And on the protection side, this is what most people know about and think about when it comes to encryption, for example. It's about protecting sensitive data wherever it travels, wherever it resides, so that you can assure customers, partners, your stakeholders that if a breach does occur, the data has been de-identified and the data is unusable in the wrong hands. We see customers really using this to help accelerate cloud adoption, right? You've got a lot of sensitive data on premise that you want to move to the cloud, and there may be some security and compliance challenges with that. So being able to accelerate and be confident in moving to the cloud. Also, data sharing patterns, right? Data sharing internally, but also data sharing externally with other partners and vendors. So those are some of the key use cases we tend to see driving the data protection conversation. So that's the first column. The second column is really around data privacy. So this is focused on that usability conversation and being able to embed security and privacy in data sets and lower the enterprise risk profile, because this allows you to decrease time to market for things like AI, machine learning, analytics use cases, and be able to adopt all the latest and greatest technologies in the cloud, maybe as an example, right? To be able to take advantage of the valuable data you as an organization have. And then finally, in the last column is about data governance. I like to refer to this as the laws, rules, and regulations of the land. This is really helping to simplify and standardize and have a single pane of glass to help you adopt and enforce policies, whether this be on-prem, cloud, multi-cloud, some hybrid version of that. And being able to also secure that data, right? Taking a zero trust, least privilege model around securing the data with role-based access so that you can still get the right people, the right access at the right time. So this is what Protegrity does. Now, next is really how we do it. How we do it is really focused on 4 key things. It's first focused on the data itself and being able to find where personal and sensitive information resides, right? This is discovering, classifying, prioritizing all of the sensitive information you as an organization have, and then being able to, second, apply security directly to that data. And this is where you want to really look for something that has all of the different data protection methods that may be appropriate for your business. And so encryption and tokenization are things that you probably hear a lot. There's also dynamic data masking, there's anonymization. The point is there's a lot of different security methods that can be applied to the data itself. Then you need to make sure that you're able to support all of the platforms. So once you found it and once you secured it, it needs to be able to apply to data at rest, data in transit, data in use, regardless of where that sits. Could be applications and mainframes on-prem, databases and files, could be out in the cloud, big data, enterprise data warehouses, right? You know what's in your environment, but the point is that this is really being able to look across the different platforms that both store and consume your data. And then finally, at the end of the day, it's about unlocking business use cases, right? We do all of those things that I just mentioned. Find the sensitive information, secure it, and protect it across platforms so that you can enable the business without risk. So this is your business stakeholders, your data scientist teams, or even your machine learning models, right, that need to be able to use that data. Now, how Protegrity does this, it really has both a centralized management discussion and a decentralized protection concept. What that means is, and this is just some examples that you see here across the screen, right? You probably have lots of different databases or warehouses or cloud providers that you're using, and Protegrity can work across all of them, but we also do so in a centralized way from a management perspective. So you have the ability to configure once and protect your data consistently wherever it travels. So you can protect it on-prem before it moves to the cloud and have that protection follow it as you go through your cloud migration. And so there's several different strategies that we have, right? Some of them are native database protectors, like with an Oracle or SQL Server, where we're in memory within those databases. We also have a gateway technology, which allows us to intercept traffic, right? Sit in between the traffic or sit in between the endpoints and intercept that, or leverage RESTful API calls, or monitor cloud storage or NFS drives to be able to see when data is loaded onto those systems and secure it at that point. We also have things like our application protectors, which are SDK libraries written in different languages that your programmers can start to integrate with. So the point is, Protegrity is really kind of a Swiss Army knife when it comes to protection. There's a lot of different ways to protect data. And what happens is you configure that one time, and wherever your data may be sitting, right, or wherever it's traveling or wherever it's being consumed, that protection gets pushed out to those endpoints. Now, when I talk about protection getting pushed out to the endpoints, what I'm really talking about is a data security policy. And this policy is made up of a couple of things. It's made up of, first, well, what's the data, right? What is the sensitive information in the organization? Then the where does that data reside? How is it ingested? How is it being consumed? And then it's about the data elements themselves. And data elements are really the protection that we're going to put on the data. Does this data need to be encrypted? Should it be tokenized? Do I need to anonymize this because it needs access, or the machine learning model needs it? So it's really about defining that different protection mechanisms. And then the who should be allowed to see the data. So this is really role-based access control, where you define the type of access that someone needs and the type of visibility they need into the data. And then finally, it's kind of that whole when, the monitoring, the auditing, the logging, so that you can see where users are interacting with your data, how they're interacting with it, and potentially find where suspicious activity is occurring. So this is what gets pushed out in that decentralized model in the cloud, on-prem, wherever that data may be. And so if we think about this from, again, a kind of an architectural perspective, we have what we call our enterprise security administrator, where it's your single pane of glass to configure that policy one time. That policy gets deployed to all of those different endpoints that I was talking about on the previous slide. But what's really important is those endpoints really have distributed in-memory tokenization type capabilities, where sitting on the platform is where the protection is happening. This does a couple of things for you. It reduces network latency, so it's much more performant than things like vaulted options. But it's also able to do things like decrease cost on the cloud, because now instead of having to stand up a centralized vault where and highly available that vault, right, so that all the data can flow through it, you're using native in-memory technologies that can scale up and scale down based on your usage. But ultimately the goal, right, the endpoint here is that you're able to protect and unprotect data wherever it resides, wherever it travels, and wherever it's going to be consumed by your users. Now, when I talk about those data elements, the data elements are really where we think about the different data protection options. And this is hugely important, because you have to balance security and usability that fits your needs. And this is where, not all data is the same. Not all data flows are the same. Not all data use cases are the same. So why should all data protection be the same? You really need to have a business discussion around what's the point of the data that we're trying to use here. And so then what protection makes the most sense? And if we start on the far left, right, it's one that has some of the least impact, because it's just about monitoring, not even changing the data at all, literally just logging and auditing the who, what, when, where, and how of what's happening with your sensitive information. Then as we start to progress over, you can go to things like data masking, which now doesn't change the data at rest, but changes the data at consumption time. So from a presentation perspective, the information is changed and masked depending on the user's roles. Then as we keep going, we now start to getting into changing the data itself. So anonymization is a non-reversible, right? This is where you're going to take a set of information and maybe anonymize it to share with a partner or a machine learning model to really de-identify sensitive information to empower those types of analytics or data sharing patterns that you need. And then finally is really tokenization and encryption. This is where you're changing the data from, James Rice, for example, becomes ABCD XYZ within your repository. So you've completely obfuscated the information, the sensitive information within your systems. So these are some of the different data protection options, but Let's kind of talk about that in practice, right? What does that really look like? And what's important is that you know what your sensitive information is. Could be PII, PHI, PCI, or it could be none of the personal information. It could just be IP or other sensitive and critical data. So you know what that is and what's important to you. I'm going to take a simple example of personally identifiable information and focus on a date of birth. And there's really two concepts that we want to talk about. It is the data at rest and the data in use. And so data at rest has options like encrypting the data, where you're going to use things like AES 256 or triple DES to be able to encrypt, or tokenization or format preserving encryption, which is important, and obviously in the name of FPE, is format preserving. So this doesn't require you to change the data types, for example, in your database, where if you were encrypting a date of birth, it's obviously no longer a date format. You may have to change the data format within your repositories. And then finally, there's also hashing, right, kind of for passwords, and again, kind of the one-way, non-reversible. Now, the other side of the conversation is the data in use. And this is what's really interesting, is you can start to mix and match these. So you might tokenize data while it's at rest, and then mask data while it's in use. Or you do nothing at rest and mask the data only at presentation time. Again, what's powerful about the Protegrity data protection platform is the ability to take one or more and mix and match these type of data protection methods across all of the different platforms that you're looking to support. And then finally, the last piece here is really anonymization, which is taking that date of birth and making it private, right? Because a machine learning model doesn't necessarily need to know an exact date of birth, but it definitely needs to know an age so that it can still take advantage of the data you have to apply in the models that it's performing. Now, if we really kind of take that concept and look at a specific example of data, here's some raw data that may exist within an environment, right? Kind of typical name, social, email, address, credit card information. When you tokenize that data, at rest, it all becomes obfuscated. So now, right, this is where you even start to look at taking things out of scope for some of those security and compliance initiatives, because no one's going to be able to identify Jane Doe here and any of the information associated with Jane, because it's all been tokenized. But at the consumption layer, right, you're going to have users that need that access. And this is where role-based access control comes in. Because first, let's talk about a finance user. So I have a finance user now that needs full access. Maybe they're going to be running POs, or they're going to be charging the customer. And so they need full access into the information to do some of those things. But we have a customer service rep who only needs partial access, right? They don't need the full SSN or date of birth or credit card information, and don't really need the spending information. They need maybe the last four of the social or the month and day of the date of birth to be able to help identify a user. And so this is where you're starting to mix and match, right, some of those concepts from the previous slide. And then finally, right, another example is your machine learning model. Well, the machine learning model doesn't really know Jane from James, and doesn't need to. The machine learning model really just needs to know things like the year. So in this case, I have someone who's 40 years old. I have someone that lives in the greater, let's say, Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex, right? And their spending limit is over a certain amount. So now I can start targeting marketing or targeting ads towards this person because I know more about them. But again, I have the privacy embedded because no one needs to be able to know that this was Jane in particular. Now, that's really a bulk of what I wanted to go over on the data protection platform. We really want to talk a little bit about a couple of specific customer use cases here. And I'll go through one where we were helping a customer both accelerate their cloud adoption and drive some new revenue. And then I'll hand it over to Brajesh to kind of continue talking about some other customer examples. So this is a customer of ours that was a large independent broker-dealer, right? Financial services organization. And they had an interesting concept here. They had PII, right? Their own internal data sets. But then they had PII and SPI from third-party data sets as well. And so really what their business problem was is that they were investing in analytics and wanting to move to the cloud, but they needed more data to be available because the purpose of moving to the cloud was to take advantage of machine learning models and all the latest and greatest technologies to be able to do more with their data. And then their specific use case was actually a recruiting use case. They were wanting to focus their recruiting team to go recruit the most high value unaffiliated financial advisors. And so the challenges for them were, well, security and privacy of both internal and third-party data. Before they could get that third-party data, they had to ensure that partner that they were protecting it. And you know, they were trying to do some of this stuff manually, and it was very time intensive, right? A lot of time and effort for data prep, which was slowing down their journey to the cloud. It was slowing down their ability to take advantage of machine learning use cases. But what they really needed was these data sets in the cloud that could have an acceptable level of risk, but also having all the utility that it needs. And you know, for them, the key decision criteria was, okay, first, this needs to support both on-prem and cloud, because we want to protect stuff as it's moving to the cloud so that it's protected when it lands. They wanted this to be really native cloud technology. And so in this particular customer, as you can kind of see in the bottom left, they were using AWS. So this is things like S3, Athena, SageMaker. But the purpose was, since they're building up these machine learning capabilities, they wanted to be more and more cloud native. But they also needed to make sure that their data scientist team was able to do the things that they need to do, which is embedding things like k-anonymity, L-diversity, T-closeness into those models. And so this was the story of what that customer was trying to do. Now, if I break this down two ways, I'll first start with the business data flow. So they had their on-prem data, right, that they were looking to move to the cloud, and they took advantage of Protegrity's vaultless tokenization to protect that data in the cloud. Then they needed to build those machine learning models on top of that data. So they were using the AWS functionality, but they were also combining that with Protegrity's anonymization to feed machine learning, feed those prediction engines, and ultimately output a set of data that could then be used by the business, right? This really goes back to the very first slide. You have to protect data to make sure it's worthless in the wrong hands. That's the start of this flow. But then you have to unlock the data and make it valuable in the right hands. And so that's the second half of this picture, is to say, great, now we have protected data in the cloud that's generating machine learning models and can be consumed by our business users to really, in this case, go bring high value high value advisors into the organization. Now, I'll go a little bit more technical here on this before I turn it over to Brajesh. And so if I take that same flow and look at it from a technical architecture perspective, you have the same internal and external data sets, right? Those data sets are moving through an ETL tool that are actually taking them to the cloud and dropping them in S3. Within S3 is really where they're monitoring for that data to land and applying protection. So the vaultless tokenization occurs and stores the data within S3. Now, what happens then is Glue actually facilitates a process between S3 and SageMaker to transform data and make it available for machine learning. But that machine learning model is also then leveraging Protegrity's anonymization for those things I was talking about before, like the k-anonymity, the L-diversity, the T-closeness, to really make sure that we're truly making these data sets private. Then, right, on a scheduled basis, Glue, again, interacting with SageMaker, is using those models. So those models are then deployed into the prediction engine, also leveraging anonymization to output stored predictions, right? Those stored predictions get output. They're there for Athena, because Athena is their consumption layer then where role-based access control is applied. And what's really interesting as you think about this, it's just fairly easy to apply data protection. You're applying it up front to protect the data as it's coming into the cloud, and you're applying it on the back end to unlock the data, right, when it's time for the right business users to use it. And you're allowing things like SageMaker, in this case, to be able to consume anonymization capabilities to help really privatize data for the machine learning models and the prediction engines. So that's just a high-level overview of what we did for one of our customers. Brajesh, I'll turn it over to you now if you'd like to continue the customer conversation.
Sure. Thanks, James. Hey, everybody. This is Prajesh. So I have one more case study that I want to share with everyone on the webinar. And this one is for a health insurance company. This is one of the top 5, I want to say, Fortune 50 health insurance companies based out of US. And uh, I want to talk about why did we look into Protegrity for this particular client in the first place. So I want to start with the business challenges. Obviously, it's a health insurance company. They also had PII and PHI data. In addition to that, with, as you all may be aware, with any health insurance company or any healthcare company, there's additional regulatory requirements, compliance requirements around customer data. So there's lots of reasons why, in addition to what James mentioned in the previous case study, where if you protect, encrypt, and unencrypt data for the right user roles, there's a lot of value that you can unlock from it. That itself is a very good reason for this particular client to choose Protegrity and to encrypt their data. But there was an even more pressing concern which they had, which is compliance and regulatory requirements. So that's another reason. So there's multiple reasons why they wanted data encryption in place at rest and for data on the move. And we got engaged. We are one of their preferred business partners. We're service providers. We provide a lot of services to this particular client. We were familiar with their infrastructure, especially their on-prem and cloud infrastructure, including mainframes. And so when they asked us, we looked at their requirements, we understood what their pain points were around compliance regulatory requirements and also around encrypting data on-prem and on the cloud. And after understanding their complete requirements, we looked at Protegrity as a solution. It was and still is a good fit because it helped them meet their immediate requirements for encryption, and it also helped them not just encrypt their data on-prem, but also encrypt their data on the cloud. We went about implementing Protegrity for this particular client in 2 phases. In phase 1, we focused on encrypting their existing data on-prem. Now, again, the reason here is there were some encryption was a higher priority for them. Encryption was the first priority for them. The second priority for them was to move to the cloud. And so we went in that order. The good news is Protegrity works in both places. It helps encrypt the data both on-prem and on the cloud. So that's another reason why it made sense to choose this product and the platform. And in phase 1, when we implemented encryption for the on-prem systems, we were able to leverage some of the features that James covered in the previous use case, where we were able to do selective encryption. We didn't have to encrypt the entire data set or the entire data store. We could do selective encryption. We could do attribute-based encryption. This is a big client, and it's got in-house teams that want to have access to certain data, and it also has external vendors like us working with them. And for in those scenarios, the access has to be different from the folks that are in-house, that are their employees. So to be able to provide the right level of encryption and decryption for the right roles, depending on who's logging in and who's checking, Protegrity was very, very helpful in being able to implement that. And we were able to do that in phase 1 for their on-prem systems. In phase 2, we were able to migrate them to the cloud, and we were able to continue to provide, with the help of Protegrity, we were able to continue to provide the encryption which they were using on-prem. So they still got the application-specific encryption, the attribute-specific encryption, and they still got and they still were able to migrate to the cloud. The migration itself was done on an application-to-application basis. It was just a phased approach. That's how we typically do migrations for most clients. That's how we did it for this particular client. And with each migration, we ensured that the encryption stays in place. Not only does the application continue to work, obviously, but also the encryption stays in place. What they were using on-prem, they should be able to continue to use on the cloud as well. And lastly, there's a lot of benefits that came out of this particular journey for this client. Not only were they able to meet their regulatory and compliance requirements, but it's also important, the one-time implementation is great, but it's also important to have a solution that is easy to manage and maintain. We, as a service provider, we always look for software or solutions on a long-term basis. We have the ability to implement multiple products, but we always recommend products which are easy to implement and also easy to manage and maintain over time, which was a big ask for this client. And again, Protegrity checks all the boxes. It's got the centralized policy management. It's got support for legacy. It's got support for supporting multiple, for being able to define encryption for different user roles and different user levels, internal users versus external users. Because it has all these features and because of the way these features are made available for both on-prem and cloud, it was a good fit. It is still a good fit, and there's a lot of benefit this client got from this particular implementation. All right, I know there's folks on the call who would have questions about both of these use cases, and we'll get to that in a minute. I have this one diagram which shows this is for phase one. This is partially what we did for phase one. So we had data which is on mainframe, and there's logical partitions on mainframe, test environments, QA environments, production environments. And we did encryption at the application and at the data set level. So even within certain applications, there are certain data sets that did not need to be encrypted, and there are certain that had to be encrypted. So as you can see here, we were able to apply selective encryption, which was the ask for the customer, and we were able to do it with Protegrity, and we were able to meet that requirement. And so both end users, internal and external, were able to access the right kind of data based on their roles, and they didn't have to worry about, and even the admins did not have to worry about the data falling into the wrong hands or users having access to data that they shouldn't. So all of this was taken care of at the policy level, and the benefits were, again, this is on-prem, so this was done for the systems and applications on-prem, but the benefit is we were able to carry it forward to the cloud when we migrated these applications to the cloud. All right, James?
Yeah, absolutely, Brajesh. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Royal Cyber specialization in enterprise transformation for the
Sure.
partnership?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, we are an IT solutions and services company, and we do solutions and services in digital transformation, right? So we do a lot of cloud migration work, data integrity, data encryption work, automation work, all the things that you would typically want to do if your organization is undergoing the digital transformation journey. A few things to keep in mind when the reason why it makes sense to do a partnership to consider both Protegrity and Royal Cyber, for example, is because with Royal Cyber, we as a service provider, we are technology agnostic, especially in the case of cloud adoption, we are cloud agnostic. We actually will focus more on the requirements and the infrastructure and the challenges that the customer has as of today, and we would recommend the appropriate cloud or clouds that the customer should migrate to. And because we're technology agnostic, we can do that. We don't have to recommend one particular cloud. We can recommend more than one. Not only do we do that as part of our cloud readiness assessments, we also do the analysis and create architecture diagrams and roadmaps for how a customer should migrate to the cloud. And we also do the actual migrations. We actually help execute those plans as well, and we help customers migrate to the cloud. We've done it many, many times for customers like the health insurance company we looked at earlier and many others. We have helped customers migrate to AWS, Azure, GCP, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, etc. So we have that expertise, and that's why it makes sense to go with a combination of someone like Royal Cyber who has the implementation expertise, plus a software company like Protegrity that has the platform, that has the product that can give you the right features. James, if you want to talk a little bit about Protegrity.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why we're really excited to be partnered with the Royal Cyber team here as well, because we take a very similar approach to being agnostic to where your data resides, moves, or gets used. And, you know, our focus is on data security. And lots of people talk about data security, but I think the important point here, when we say we specialize in things like faultless tokenization, dynamic data masking, anonymization, encryption, is because we're protecting the data itself. So, you know, lots of security vendors will talk about keeping the bad guys out. And you'll have to bear with me because I know it's an overused analogy of it's not a matter of if something's going to happen, it's a matter of when something's going to happen. And so it's really a defense in depth strategy because don't get me wrong, you want to keep the bad guys out of your network as well. But by protecting the data itself, right, you really start to future-proof yourself from potential ransomware issues or data exposure or insider threat conversations. And what's important is that you're not, though, just locking down the data. You're making sure it's consumable by the business, because at the end of the day, if all you provide is data protection, you kind of end up becoming your own ransomware platform, right? Because you have to make data usable and expose that to the right people at the right time. And that's really where Protegrity shines, is helping unlock those type of use cases. And together, right, when we look at Royal Cyber's specialization around helping with the cloud migration, partnered with Protegrity's ability to protect that data as you're moving to the cloud, we can really help accelerate that journey for you and help you, you know, take on the blockers or any challenges. For example, do you have security or compliance people raising their hand saying, wait, you can't go to the cloud yet because we've got to make sure we're protecting this sensitive information? Well, we can really start checking those boxes and help you get the approvals that you need to do that. And the last piece I would like to add here, and then Brajesh, I really welcome your comments as well, is that, you know, one of the things that we're going to think about is how to help you with your use case. We just went over several customer use cases that were specific to their environments, but one of the things that we'll do with you is really help understand what your use case is, what your data flows are, and look at what your cloud migration strategy should be and what your data protection architecture should look like. So that's what the combination of Royal Cyber and Protegrity can really do for those of you on the call with us today. Brajesh, anything you want to add here on this?
No, you're absolutely right, James. In fact, I believe we have a slide that has a couple of options just for the folks on this webinar. A couple of options and that they can leverage. There's two options that you see here. I want to talk a little bit about both of them. So on the left, we've got assessment. This is something that is very useful for folks who have seen the platform and its features as of today. But if you're not sure how much time and effort it's going to take to implement Protegrity for your existing data encryption or cloud adoption requirements, then assessment is a great option to pick, because as part of the assessment, we will conduct Protegrity and Royal Cyber together. We will conduct workshops, technical workshops, deep dive sessions with you, and we will work with you to understand your technology landscape, your applications, your data, your encryption requirements, and your cloud adoption requirements. We will do our analysis of this of your infrastructure, and there's tools available. There's a discovery scan option available from Protegrity that helps us do these things, and it helps us classify and discover where the data is, where the sensitive data is, and what needs to be encrypted. So with the help of this tool and with the help of Royal Cyber expertise together, we will do an assessment, and the outcome is basically our recommendation on what your encrypted environment or infrastructure will look like, whether it's on-prem or cloud, and what is the infrastructure going to look like? What is the implementation plan for you to adopt encryption and to migrate to the cloud? What does that high-level plan look like? How much time is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? We can answer all of these questions. In fact, we create a assessment report that has all of this information, and that is the outcome of the assessment. James, you want to add anything to the assessment before we talk about the Jumpstart?
No, I think that that's spot on. I mean, I guess maybe the only thing I might add is, at the end of the day, when you saw some of those pictures and diagrams and stuff from before of other customers, that's what we want to help you do, right? We want to help look at what your cloud migration is going to look like, what your data protection architecture is going to look like, and we'll work with you to do that. But no, that's great. Yeah, Brajesh, do you want to talk about the Jumpstart, or would you like me to?
Yeah, go ahead, James. I'll chime in.
Okay, that's perfect. So really, when we think about the Jumpstart now, the goal here is to say, well, how can we help you move fast? How can we get this stuff up and running if you already have maybe some cloud migration that you're thinking about or some stuff that you're looking to do? And so this is a guided implementation of the Protegrity platform in conjunction with your migration to the cloud. And it really includes access to everything Protegrity has to offer, right? You're able to have the centralized management we talked about. You have access to all of the different data protection methods that we were talking about, different protectors depending on where your data is, rules and policies that we've put in place, at all the customers we've worked with in the past. We're delivering training for your team, certification for your team, and full access to 24/7 support to help get you started. So the goal here with the accelerated Jumpstart is to really work with you and move fast so that we do not slow down your journey to the cloud.
Excellent. I think that covers the next steps and the offerings. It looks like we have time for Q&A.
Excellent. Well, I'll get things started. This is Brian Plamondon again, coming on here. Gentlemen, thank you very much for the insight thus far. I've been learning a lot, and I hope that everybody else that is here in attendance has learned something. The first question I have is from one of our attendees here. It's, as cloud providers like AWS have their own encryption techniques, how is Protegrity's solution different from this? I think this is something that James, maybe you could start with, and Brajesh, if you could kind of add on from your experience as an MSSP.
Yeah, it's actually a really good question, and it's one that comes up a lot because it's the difference between coarse and fine-grained protection. What you see with most vendor-specific protection, first and foremost, is it's focused on protecting things like the database or the repository or the files as a whole. So while that data is sitting on a server somewhere, but no one's moving data to the cloud just for it to sit there, right? We're moving data to the cloud so it can be consumed. And so that's where fine-grained protection comes in, because you're protecting the contents of the file and the database at a much more granular level, so that while people are using it, that data is still protected, not just while the data is sitting there. And I think the other consideration that I would say just around this in general is that it's also about different use cases, right? Making sure that you're able to support the full use case of data protection, not just the storage data protection conversation. Brajesh, anything you want to add there to that?
Sure, I'll just add a few things. So I'll actually take a step back. So Brian, when we think about cloud adoption, right, you're absolutely right. There are data encryption options available in some form, in some way, shape, or form in all cloud providers, right? So GCP and AWS and Azure, there's encryption and security options available, but it all depends on the client's requirements, right? So to James' point, when we are doing something like an assessment or the Jumpstart, when we discover the data that they have, what kind of data they have, what level of encryption is required, what kind of users and roles exist in a particular organization, that in order for us to be able to meet that requirement for that client in the cloud, it takes a combination of multiple things, heavily Protegrity, but also we can leverage things that are available in a particular cloud. But then the actual implementation varies from client to client, and it all depends on the requirements or the challenges that the client is facing.
And Brajesh, if you look at the use case that you walked through, I think is another great example. They had a use case to protect it on premise first and then move it to the cloud. Well, some of those native cloud technologies are also not going to help you on prem. So if you want
Correct.
something that's protecting you maybe in multiple clouds or a hybrid on-prem cloud approach, that's another reason that those are not enough.
Correct. All the more reason to leverage something like Protegrity, because you get the options, and it also future proofs you in some ways, like you did it with the client that I was talking about. We did encryption on prem and we used Protegrity, but it doesn't mean that they're going to have to redo everything when they go to the cloud. We could leverage the same product, the same platform for encrypting essentially the same data in the cloud once we did the cloud migration.
And it's a great point. Now that I'm kind of thinking about it, just if we have a company that is working both in in GCP and Azure and AWS, and they have that multi-cloud idea, instead of having to have inconsistencies maybe with different types of encryption techniques with different clouds, you have this one overarching that enterprise security administrator, that one centralized place where you can push out all of the same policies. So it actually kind of simplifies things as well. That's really great input, gentlemen. Now, the next question that I have is, what is the best or most preferred method of data protection?
Yeah, let me take a first stab at that because I think, unfortunately, the answer is going to be it depends, right? And it depends on your data flow and your data use case because things like tokenization can be really good when you're wanting to protect data at rest and not have to change the data type within the repository. But a token is really unusable by a machine learning model because a machine learning model needs to have context of, like, let's say that date of birth example I gave before. A token date of birth is just gobbledygook. You need to understand, the age range of somebody. And so when it comes to things like a machine learning model use case, anonymization may be more important or data masking may be more important. So yeah, I think the short answer is honestly, it will depend on your specific data use case.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see. What's the next question we have here? Oh, excellent. So big bang or piecemeal? I guess this is kind of going towards the migrating everything at once, or go, one app at a time or one database at a time. Is there kind of a recommendation that you might have, Brajesh?
Thanks, Brian. So yeah, again, unfortunately, I'm going to have to reuse the answer that James gave. It again, in this case, also it depends, but there are certain things that can help us determine, or for the folks that are attending the webinar, that can help them determine the strategy. When we do our technical deep dive and when we look at all the applications and databases that exist on-prem as of today, we have seen in previous migrations that we've done for customers, we have seen databases that are shared across multiple applications, and we have seen databases with dedicated databases as well. So one app, one database, those sort of combinations. When you have a one app, one database combination, it makes sense to go on an app by app basis because it's doable, it's controlled, it's structured, and you can do that in a way where you can test everything at the application level. And if there are issues, you're not impacting the overall infrastructure or the overall user base for all your applications, right? So that's one thing that comes to mind that I want to share with the audience. When you have a shared database, then it gets a little bit tricky, and there's still options available to do it piecemeal, to do it at application by application, but it may require some re-engineering. There's also an option to take the whole database and the 4 or 5 applications that are using it and migrate all of them together. So it's not a big bang, it's like a mini bang. It's a small group of applications going to the cloud at the same time. There is some risk there, but again, if it's planned well and if you have before and after tests that can be run and executed, that show that the application is working as intended. That is also doable. We have done that for some of our customers. So yeah, these are some of the ways that applications can be migrated. But the actual path, again, it depends on the technology landscape or the infrastructure of the client.
It's very interesting, kind of the way that you explain that with the mini bang kind of idea, and that really I understand a little bit more with that whole it depends piece of the puzzle, because, and I guess it brings more validity to the assessment approach, because every organization has different strategic priorities, whether it's a data analytics kind of push, or maybe they are migrating in order to do data sharing, but every company has different requirements. So the way that you're looking at it with that mini bang or the big bang, and kind of the it depends answers that both of you have had is we need to take a step back and understand truly what is an enterprise trying to do, and then how that can be most effectively executed, whether it be in that big bang, mini bang, or piecemeal type setup. The next question I have here is, how much time does it take to execute a cloud migration for AWS or GCP? Is one of these better or more efficient? I guess that's a second piece to the question. Okay.
Okay, so I'll take this one, James. So Brian, the answer again is depends on the complexity level of the applications. As I said, there's and also the migration strategy. So if you've got an infrastructure where you've got applications and you're doing something like a lift and shift, which is a very popular, very frequently used approach by many customers. We've done it as well for clients, where you take the entire application as is and move it to the cloud. When you do a lift and shift approach, the amount of time it takes for the overall migration or cloud adoption is typically less, as opposed to you look at an application and the way it's working as of today, and you think of modernizing the application while you're migrating it to the cloud. If you go down that path, it takes a little bit longer, but it sets you up to be truly a cloud native company or organization long term. And it also opens the door for more digital transformation in the cloud down the line, right? So I know I don't have an exact answer for you exactly how much time it takes, because unfortunately the short answer is it depends, but hopefully these two approaches make a little bit of sense. And the other part, which cloud is better? So there again, the way the applications are structured today, right? The way they're being used today. Different clouds have different cloud services that they offer. A lot of them are similar, but there are some unique offerings from AWS and GCP and Azure, which are better suited for certain types of applications. I'll give you one example. AWS has something called as a Glacier, which is a good storage option for a large amount of data that is accessed less frequently, right? So think backups and archive data and such, and archive log files and things like that. If you have a setup where you have a lot of data which needs to be backed up, it's a large amount of data, but it's not used frequently, and then AWS Azure Glacier could be a good option. And I'm oversimplifying here. I understand, we need to look at other things as well, and there's other requirements as well. But this is one such example. In general, though, it all depends on what the applications are doing today on-prem. And once we understand that, then we can recommend which cloud would be good for you. That's where, again, I'm going back to the assessment. We actually do cloud comparison charts. So we would do an application per application, or even platform by platform, or business unit by business unit comparison and recommendation on which cloud makes the most sense to go to. And sometimes we may even recommend a hybrid cloud, because We want you to have the best of everything. So the assessment is what would give you the exact and definitive answer. My answer right now would be, it depends, and we really should do an assessment.
I really appreciate the input from both of you, and it really, for me, it makes me that much more excited about our partnership and what Protegrity has to bring to the table with the data protection, both on-prem, in the cloud, protecting data at rest, in motion, in use, and then how Royal Cyber can take this assessment and you guys can work with an enterprise in order to really truly figure out what the need is and then how to apply that. And the fact that both of our organizations work in that cloud agnostic and in the what is best for the enterprise, that approach, it really it opens a lot of doors. We have a couple of minutes remaining, and believe that is all the questions that we've had for the morning. I just wanted to again thank you very much, James, and I wanted to thank you as well, Brajesh, for taking the time today and really just educating all of us. Either of you have anything else that you wanted to add?
I'm good. This is Brajesh. I'm good. I just want to thank everyone for joining, and hope everyone was able to learn something today, and the webinar was useful. We have contact information in this deck, and it's going to go up on our sites as well. Please feel free to reach out to us, to me or James or Brian, in case you need more information, if you need a follow-up call. If you're interested in the assessment or the Jumpstart, by all means, please reach out to us and we can continue the conversation. Thank you for everyone who attended. James?
Yeah, nothing else from my side. I'll just echo the thank you, and we look forward to talking with you all soon, hopefully to help you on your cloud migration and your data protection strategies specifically.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great day, everyone.